Real quick, before we get into it, I have launched a podcast on my second channel, Shoveled Goblin, with book reviews Kill Evan himself, where we're both going to be talking about news for the speculative fiction space, our own writing experiences as we're trying to go trad, and just other bookish, nerdy things. The first episode is up today, so go ahead and check it on out. Now, let's get into House of the Dragon, episode 1 and 2. Oh, and if you would like to meet me, I'm going to be doing a signing in Rochester, New York this weekend. Details on the screen now, as well as who I'll be doing it with. So if you happen to have some time, be in the area, and want to swing on by, I'd love to see y'all there. So I'm not feeling doing the typical review format for these episodes, like spoiler free. This is House of the Dragon, and this is a hardcore fantasy fan channel. If you're subscribed to me, I think there's probably a greater than 90% chance you were in the 7.8 million people who watched the premiere. So we're just gonna instead format this as kind of like a watch along. And for that very reason, I have watched episode 1 as of now. I have not watched episode 2. You'll see the split in the time code in the video. Those will be my episode 2 thoughts. So let's go in fresh and share the experience of consuming House of the Dragon, season 2, episode 1. We're back in the north, and I don't know if it's just my TV, but it seems they've certainly cranked up the brightness a little bit in the north, which I do appreciate. It makes it all a lot more visible, though maybe it's just because it's supposed to be a greater passage of time by the time we're up there in Game of Thrones. It somehow feels a bit cleaner, a bit nicer. Makes sense. Continuity, I guess. Does ice age? But we get some of the lines we've kind of come to expect when the North is being discussed. It's not a sentence, it's an honor. Disagree. Understand why you have to lie to yourself if you're in that situation, though. And just immediately, I was captivated by the House of the Dragon, A Song of Ice and Fire style dialogue. I feel like warm and fuzzy coming back into this cold, depressing show as a fan, because there's just like a certain caliber that's come to be expected. And as I'm watching this and reading Sabriel by Garth Nix, I'm really just appreciating the level of effort that goes into a certain style of fantasy dialogue. You know what I'm talking about. And the dedication it can take to pull it off, because when it's done poorly, it's god-awful. Talking about like the threat of coming down from the north, I can immediately see all the memes and comments about like, yeah, but in season 8 it was handled in a day, so is the threat that bad? I don't care. In terms of like the mythos for this world, it still has weight, right? The wall itself is still imposing, and the myth of what they're guarding against can still be felt in the air. Say what you will, all the criticisms you want to have about season 8, I don't think the actual like intimidation factor of White Walkers and what waited beyond the wall ever felt not intimidating. Like no one wants to be caught out there. But just as I was thinking, boy, I'd like to see a dragon, we cut back down south and get just that. And the fallout from the end of last season really starts to become the clear narrative thrust for this season going forward. Aemond, his murder of Lucerys is kind of pushed this conflict that was already clearly geared towards war just into full throttle. And now we see the houses begin to, within this episode at least, really do away with the niceties, the facade of this will be a noble war, and we get one of the most gruesome, gnarly, actually off-camera yet effectively executed kills in the live-action history of the franchise, but we'll get there. Let's focus more on the actual beginning here. But in this aftermath, we see Daemon wants revenge for Aemond's actions. These names are not going to get confusing and annoying at all. And rather casually, he's looking to go on an assassination attempt, but is dissuaded from it because he can't get a partner for now. Rhaenys shoots down his plan. Fair. Like, as intimidating as Daemon is, Aemond's dragon still the scariest thing in the sky. And there's that continual edge to when Daemon tries to do things like this, where he consistently, over the last season and an episode for me, whenever he's trying to be his most brutal, often kind of gets his wings clipped, pun intended. But I'm really looking forward to the scene where we see him not hold back, not be dissuaded. And we kind of get that here as his plotline continues. But first we cut to the high towers at an Orange Fort. We get an establishing shot with a scorpion shooter. Something that shot scorpions would be scary, but you know, the thing that shoots the spear, before cutting to some good old cunnilingus where Alicent tells the guard she's been having a fling with, like, we're not going to do it anymore. No one believes that, even for a second. I even got the feeling the character in the scene who Alicent was talking to, whose name always eludes me, was looking at her like, okay, put my cape on. I'll be back this evening, which he was. But we have maybe my second or third favorite scene of the full episode after this, where the King's Council for Aemon comes together and we see the imbalances of power that are going on, and also the kind of like disappointing bluntness of how the green team moves. While there are so many vipers on Team Black, Team Green's not even really able to keep their basic power dynamics in check. Not only is Aemon just clearly the strongest presence in the room when he shows up, but we also have this younger prince boy getting a little emotionally attached to him, cutely playing, so things can hurt more later. And the King's, again, kind of just blunt, like, establishment over authority of this one character that Alicent has to step in and stop, which I did take as her being like, literally, hey, we got shit to do. But also from the King's perspective, it's just such a Joffrey-esque move, obviously without being like quite as cruel, that it did feel like beneath him. It's like, come on, your rule is just starting and we're giving off these vibes. I did like how the actual strategy of this like meeting of potential war did end up talking quite a bit about dragons. I am a slut for dragons, and I just want as much dialogue and imagery as possible to be talking about how incredible these dragons are, and the added benefit that the dialogue written around these dragons is just quite enticing and thought out, and like, yeah, that's how they would affect a war, just makes it all the more beneficial. I am just including a straight up tangent in here to say the word dragons more and then show them, please. But even like, okay, on the Alicent side of things, we see this guy who she's been working with the feet fetish ends up like replacing a majority or all, I don't really know how it was phrased, her staff. And that's such a basic mistake to make. If this was not as well written a show, I would even kind of take it as like, that's dumb, but I know this is probably going to come back to bite Alicent in the ass, and her character lines up with this. She is someone who wants to make big plays, but lacks the Tyrion mind for it. She can move to accomplish a goal, but not really in a way that people with a more deft mind around her can't outmaneuver. It builds to this sense of paranoia. Every possible fracture, crack in the armor of House Green is showing up in an aggressive way early on, meaning their entire house is feeling knives out level of paranoia. And you contrast that with Team Black, who this entire episode just feel like prize fighters getting ready for the fight of their lives. They're not exactly unified, but their goals absolutely are, and they already seem to have a far better understanding of how gargantuan this conflict is going to end up being. And juxtaposed to that paranoia polluting House Green, within House Black, we also are seeing the grief of their loss seem to feel a bit like a unifying agent. Rhaenyra is out there mourning with her dragon, who also lost something, and the people who run from her are even shown to be more sympathetic towards her. After they flee, they're looking down at her in the coast, and it's painting her, for us, the audience, in a more sympathetic lens, probably to get more ready for greater pain, but also to prime you to be more on the side of the team that seems like they're about to be the far greater aggressor. Predicting future episodes I haven't seen the best I can, to me it feels like the writers are trying to prime us to be on the side of the aggressor, which can then be undercut by possibly things being taken too far, and Team Black doing what Team Black does. As the drums were rolling through the soundtrack as Rhaenyra did return from her grief, I think I decided that meeting room, House Black's planning chamber, might be my favorite set in any live action A Song of Ice and Fire. Just personally for me, that executed like glass rock villain layer, exquisite. 10 out of 10, no notes. And as we've heard so many words from the House Green side of thing, Rhaenyra is able to set so much in motion and just impact the entirety of the rest of this episode with one simple command. Maybe her only dialogue from the show, though maybe she said something when the guy from the north came in at the end here. I want Aemon Targaryen. And this sets off, an incredibly well executed assassination. Earlier, we heard the Queen mentioning rats, and this foreshadows how Daemon Targaryen is able to send an assassin into the House of Green. not House of Green, House Hightower, Team Green. When he's planning this, though, there's this one shot of him in a hood. Am I the only one who saw that and went, Chad Legolas? Just Chad Legolas, that's what that was. We follow these assassins, getting a pretty good understanding of their character as they move through this winding maze of a palace illuminated by torchlight. It really sets this ominous feeling. It feels like they can be discovered at any moment. In just an emotionally devastating sequence, they force the queen to point out her son, and I'm so glad that when it is required, the franchise does know when to show restraint. It would be too much to show a small child being decapitated as graphically as the sound design implies. I totally understand this is like grim dark television. It's supposed to be pushing bounds, but there's a limit, right? And I would hope I can safely say no one in this audience wants to watch that happen. And from when the assassin says she's telling true onward, as the queen, mentally disabled in some severe way, queen picks up her daughter and runs from what is happening, a nightmare, and finds Alicent in bed with the guard. She said she'd just Alicent, god damn it. We get the softest report of an assassination ever. And before this assassination sequence, I thought this pilot episode was just good. It was this assassination sequence, though, that elevated this to possibly being in like my top 4 favorite episodes of House of the Dragon. I'd have to rewatch season 1 to really be sure about that. The tension, the quick chemistry between the two assassins, the moments of near discovery and stumbling into the king, the servant being there and having the small moment of, I gotta go get her before finding the queen, and this the horrible impact of what wasn't even shown. It stepped into like the artistry of like a great horror sequence to me. Just brilliantly done. Without it, average episode. With it, in my top 4, 5, around there. But you've probably already watched episode 2. You have seen it. You are probably talking at the screen like Daniel doesn't even know that the polar bear was hiding in the closet, and that's where episode 2 picks up. So I'm gonna go watch episode 2 now, then continue to give my thoughts on that. In the meantime, tell me what was your favorite scene or bit from episode 1 in the comments down below. But before we continue into episode 2, a quick word from today's sponsor, Wraithmarked Creative. Wraithmarked is delighted to be bringing you a special edition of the second book in Andrew Rowe's Arcane Ascension series, On the Shoulders of Titans. And with it being the Wraith of the Mark, you know they're going to be giving this bad boy some special treatment. I'm talking high-end offset printing, a cloth-bound case sewn binding with an attached ribbon bookmark, gold gilding on the page edges, and an embossed dust jacket with metallic foiling. And the inside is even better, with each edition featuring custom interior art, with 10 illustrations total, as well as illustrated in sheets. Now, it is going to be gold stamped, not signed by Andrew Rowe due to a health concern, which is completely okay. But I am happy to say, as of recording, the Kickstarter has already smashed through 3 of its stretch goals, meaning you are just getting a better bang for your buck as it rises. If you want to go ahead, throw in an Arbiter attunement pin, but you're going to be getting a gold foil bookmark no matter what tier you back. So if you're an Andrew Rowe fan or just wanting to check him on out, go ahead and click the link in the Kickstarter today and pick up your special edition of Book 2 on the Shoulders of Titans. And now, back to the video. So, what I didn't expect episode 2 to be was a build-up to yet another action sequence. So, of course, at the end of this episode, watch along, talk along, we are going to be deciding which assassination sequence did it better. I'm quite excited. But first, Alicent's life really sucks. I don't enjoy her very much as a person, and I think she makes very bad decisions, but I can still look at a person's situation and just objectively go, you're surrounded by just the worst men. Just the most emotionally immature, pathetic, obnoxious, power-hungry guys. She's just got so many of them in her pack that she has to deal with, and I feel so bad for someone who I don't want to be around. We should probably talk about the dead child first, though. That's a sentence. The episode actually opens with a very impactful shot of a servant carrying a bloody blanket. This kind of completes the show's full execution of murdering this child in a way that hits you like it's gory and visceral and shown, but in the Psycho tradition of not actually showing much gore, it manages to accomplish that without actually showing anything. The king seems nearly half mad with grief. He's declaring war and seems to have forgotten he already declared it by the end of this episode, but we'll talk about that. The whole time he's like, I declare war, though. I'm kind of like, nah, man, they murdered your kid. That's a declaration of war if I've ever seen one. They get to say they did it first. Hightower really begins to crumble as a person in this episode. He not only loses his job, but even at the beginning when he's talking with Alicent right in the aftermath of this child dying, one of the first things out of his mouth is just, we can't be shaken by this, which I understand, like, you know, from the perspective of war, sure. But when you're alone with your daughter and there's a death in the family, not the healthiest mentality to be displaying. He then caps this off, the cherry on top to set up his severe downfall in this episode is when he ends the scene by saying some good may still be found in this, which is like positioning him as a character to be in a way where you're like, yeah, he's smart, he's strategic, he's the one who is still trying to find a peaceful way out of this, but the futility of it all, his patheticness of his position is becoming just overwhelmingly apparent and is now so extreme he ends up shifting to being in the wrong. Like, I'm against war, don't get me wrong, but it's like, dude, at a certain point, it's happening. They find the assassin, obviously the information's given up, and this leads to the king just slaughtering a whole bunch of his rat catchers and displaying them for the city. A little bit of mixed messaging of Aemon as a king for the people. It's like, oh, he wanted to return that guy's goats, we all saw that, and then his hand stepped in, he's a nice guy. He killed his entire rat catcher staff. My God.
Coming to save me and killing all these guys is sending some seriously mixed messages.
I was originally thinking Aemon was going to have a more sympathetic light on him this episode because while everyone is being so calculated in like the first meeting of the council post-child's death, he's the one who's still breaking down while they're trying to take on a more strategic line with Hightower, and I completely found myself, despite Aemon being, you know, generally deplorable, feeling like he was the human, right? He's a father losing his son, and this is kind of enhanced in the structure of the show because we immediately jump to the queen from here. Someone who is obviously not well equipped to handle what's going on around them. Again, just not even having the agency to control the funeral for their own child. This funeral goes terribly. There's like an anxiety attack in front of the people as the cart gets stuck with just this kid's body on display.
It's not a very happy story.
That, of course, is then further undercut by the king's action of killing a bunch of innocent workers. And they're simultaneously showing this as funeral procession while the king is torturing the person who assassinated the child. And it's tonally House of the Dragon is able to steep into the darkest depths that A Song of Ice and Fire has to offer. So yeah, I would give the show a thumbs up when it comes to capturing the source material's vileness. And then we have this explosive conflict between Daemon and Rhaenyra, and this is where the show kind of really informs me as an audience member that, yeah, the stuff happening over in Team Green comes across more simplistic because it is. They are not the monoliths that the people in Team Black are in terms of personality, charisma, determination, because in just one argument between a niece and her uncle that she's gotten children from, they're able to get information from each other while using words as daggers. It feels like a duel, and while both of them lose their temper, by the end of it, Rhaenyra really gets the information she wants out of the exchange. She confirms that Daemon acted essentially out of his own selfish desire to be cruel and seek revenge, and because of that, she can no longer trust him, and he ends up going off on his own. And it just almost feels like another step in their journey. Like, they have this big blowout, but you know the next time they're going to be together, they're still going to operate together in that same way because they have this terrible relationship. Truly like Cersei, Jaime vibes going on, not just because of the one thing, but because of their power. Some more B plots are kind of set up here. The brothers at sea, Aemon kind of just chilling in his freaky side, cool. I would guess the most important of these that's being developed is the one that Rhaenyra is directly involved in, kind of working with this loyalist agent who so far is really good at convincing everybody they're not on anyone's side, and judging by their actions here in this episode, that may or may not be true, or they're just smart enough to be able to pivot at a drop of a hat, which is probably the best way to stay alive in Westeros. And I find it funny how there's this mirror image between Team Black and Green here again in these episodes that you kind of have to squint to see, but I don't think I'm crazy for saying is there, and that's as Rhaenyra begins to operate with this loyalist agent, one that has just done what they need to do to survive. It seems like a solid relationship she could actually benefit from if it's handled carefully. On the other hand, though, we see the king dismiss Otto Hightower as his hand and bring in someone who is without question loyal, but probably in the immensely wrong ways. And it's the king's own foolishness of him not being able to see someone so close to him who is not exactly a yes man, but certainly in the same vicinity as that concept, versus Rhaenyra, who has an agent she can respect because at least they're consistent. And so while Rhaenyra gains not an ally, but an asset, the king ends up with his hand banging his mom. The king's hand is banging the king's mom. I don't know how else to say that. Sycophant is the word I was trying to find there. And there's the additional parallel of Aemon is pushing someone away who is striving for the right thing that, is probably unattainable, but still they're keeping a level head, while Rhaenyra is making the correct call of pushing someone away who's not exactly helping the situation and escalating it further. So you're seeing one camp crumble while another is not solidifying, but at least addressing their problems. And after the big assassination sequence we will talk about with the brothers that was set up, we see Hightower kind of just trying to debrief with Alicent in the final scene where Alicent is trying to say, like, I've sinned, I want to confess something to you. And Otto Hightower, after losing his job and just having a bad day, essentially just responds, please shut the f*** up, I don't want to hear it. Which, like, come on, Alicent's had to deal with hearing everyone's bullshit, and now, like, she's coming to you like, listen, I need to talk, you don't have time. I mean, I get it, but dude. But then, yeah, she goes off and has a sex scene with her son's hand. But okay, which of the assassination sequences did I like more? I must say the emotion that was conveyed in the brother-on-brother duel was pretty spectacular. I also like that it never became really crucial in the choreography of the fight for us to actually realize which one was which, and instead that was utilized at the end where you don't know which brother is alive until you absolutely do, because he begs for forgiveness as he kills himself in front of his queen, not able to deal with the fact that he had to murder his own brother to protect her. It's a reveal woven into the choreography and the confusion that is enhanced by it. Fabulous. That being said, I end up liking the Ratcatcher one more, mainly because the sequence itself was just so nail-bitingly shot and executed, and the implied gore being more effective than many movies and shows out there that just show too much to the point where it desensitizes you was something I think like we can learn from. I absolutely still give it to the Ratcatchers. Partially, I'm gonna give it an edge for just the torch lighting throughout it. I liked the brothers doing a little pivot around each other. That was neat, but it did not stack up to the tension of the servant and all of that. That still is head and shoulders above. One's a 10, the other's like an 8. That's my thoughts on episodes 1 and 2. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching along with me. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Let me know if you like this format more than the spoiler-free reviews, where I try and keep as much of it out of it as possible. If you'd like to see me at a signing in Rochester, New York, I'll be there this weekend. And thank you, Wraithmarked, again, for sponsoring today's video. Oh God, I have a lot this episode. And also check out my podcast, Good on Paper, with Evan from Book Reviews Kill. I have the first episode up right now on Shoveled Goblin. Bye!